Venvi Art Gallery is pleased to present our latest installment of our Artist Talk series featuring the surreal imagining of Carrie and Baade, showcasing over 30 paintings and 15 collages spanning 20 years of art making. The haunting beauty of her oil paintings invoke the mythic past with echoes of the self in layered narratives and fantastical parables. Baade unlocks the stories from her subconscious mind, revealing psychological revelations in stimulating and provocative combinations. And with that, we hope you enjoy. So, jumping into our interview, what is the Surreal Imaginings? How did this title or phrase come about, and how did you capture that in your art?
I picked this title to try and represent all of the disparate and non-coherent elements of my work, because my work starts in the realm of the mind and then it goes off in many different directions. I think if I were to be self-critical, sometimes I feel like, wow, I kind of paint like a group show. But if you stand back far enough, there is more coherency, and I think it takes something like a 20th retrospective, which this is, in order to see different thematic themes and tropes and how they're revisited and how I'm returning to different themes, but that there are similarities over time.
Yeah. So, can you guide us through your artistic process from conception to executing and then curating your shows?
So many of these paintings started with the process of cutting up art historical works. Mm-hmm. And with that, some of us have had these toys, paper dolls, and I thought paper dolls were this incredibly unrevelatory toy. Like, it promised so much, and then when you punch them out and their perforated edges and the little tabs, like, you put the dress on and you'd want transformation, but the dress would fall off and you can't really play with them. So I had those when I was 3. Then there was this moment in graduate school when I was almost 30, and I had cut up all my art books and I cut up all my source materials, all these things that I had held up to a really high esteem. I needed to incise, I needed to cut, I needed to take those scissors and make a place for myself in the world. Once I cut the dresses off some things and the faces off of others, then I become the armature, and I can wear all these different elements and become a monster or a queen, or just perform within the work. And I had other things that I had to say. When you're working with your primary identity, it can be really shy or very self-concerned or inhibited, but putting all of these different things on to dress up, you perform and you play, and it created a whole nother world for me. So
very interesting. So this exhibition spans 20 years of your work. How have you evolved as an artist, and what do you attribute your growth to?
So part of this, I would say the only dogma I teach, and I ascribe to this myself, is the answer to painting is painting. So you just have to keep showing up and doing the work, and then doing the work itself. Sometimes we give birth to artwork, but if we're really lucky, we give birth to ourselves. And I think that's an unending act. You just have to keep being honest. You come with your questions. You also come ready to have whatever you need to be told about the work, about yourself. In this way, I mentioned that's like knock-knock jokes with the universe. Like, I'm told things by my subconscious mind in the form of pictures. By putting them into paintings, I see even more fully what it is I need to hear and understand about the self. So what others might do in the form of divination or looking at a tool for self-reflection, that's anything from a mirror to tarot cards, I do with painting. So many people have said that the work looks like tarot cards, but that's a similar method of using symbols and tropes and archetypes, and then they speak to you. And that's how my mind works, and that's how the work functions, but they're not intended to be for divination. They're just a mirror for self-revelation.
So in those 20 years, what has been your favorite piece to create that is on display in the gallery?
I think it's really easy to start with this one right here, because we're here. And so the original painting is honestly in a home in Philadelphia, but this is a reproduction of this image, and I thought it was important to bring it to this exhibit. This was one of the first breakthrough pieces I had, and I think for everyone who's a young artist, I didn't really paint a painting that I think was worth a damn till I was about 33. So it's just, you keep showing up. It wasn't that I started painting that moment. It was just like all of a sudden something really tremendous happened through concept and technique. And then this is the germination or the starting point for the body of work that I have to create next. So I have about 15 months to paint 30 paintings that will be shown at Lemieux Galleries in New Orleans, and that body of work is influenced by genealogical research. Please note that everyone, as we travel back 7 generations, I think you have 1,000 great-grandparents, and at 14 generations you have 4,000 great-grandparents. So this is an incredible journey. I'm not just weaving one family line, I'm trying to see the termination point of every single line in my family. Luckily, I'm Jones about 5 different ways, so those were quick stops, but some of those go all the way back to the 5th century. The one, though, that I'm most interested in is in the one that connects to my birthplace, which is in New Orleans, and I will be painting paintings that continue this line. So what are these self-portraits? Trying to take some of these people who are from the origin of New Orleans, but still make them as fanciful and as complex. This was this moment in history that was the creolization of many different cultures coming together to form this epiglot that is New Orleans. And I think it's a good place to talk about how we are not one people, we're not one identity, we are many, and we have to be tremendously curious and open-minded in order to surrender to that reality that we're not discrete individual people, and that maybe the ego that comes with that we have no cultural responsibility or heritage, or we come from many, many people and we're incarnate now, and what that, I'm hoping to build new realms of possibility in people's minds for what that might mean.
So, as a woman, the feminist perspective of your paintings shines through. What do you wish your audience, especially female viewers, take away from your work?
Many of the paintings I'm painting are because there were not women's voices in historical work. There were not female authors, or they were very limited. If you think about someone like Jane Austen, her whole world was in her own home. And so, in counterpoint, War and Peace, men were out in the world. And as a person, a child growing up at the tail end of the last millennium, I was just astounded by the lack of female influence and authorship and voices. The only female painters I knew were Georgia O'Keeffe and Frida Kahlo, and yet I wasn't interested in just having a voice in the present. I wanted to put my voice in the past and speak about the present. I wanted to make it as complicated as possible, but a lot of this work is about voice, it's about imagination, and I would just challenge women to also see what they can contribute, to use that voice. Because I didn't have a lot of role models, I'm trying to be a role model, and I think we all need to work collectively in order to inspire the living people now, but the people who are coming, and make, meaningful decisions that will inspire new voices.
Totally. Well, with that, we are so happy to sponsor your event here at TCC's
Thank you
Art
so
Gallery.
much. Yes, thank you to Venvi Gallery. Bad government about. So this painting is the allegory of bad government. The underwriting of the research for this was provided by FSU. I wrote a grant whereby I went to Italy, and I had the opportunity to look at the original fresco by which this is inspired by in Siena. The original fresco was created in the 14th century, and it was there to inspire gubernatorial cabinet, this oligarchy of the 9. These 9 people would decide what was best for the people in their area. And this mural cycle was in a civic building, so when they would go in and decide how they were going to influence voting and decision-making in the area, they would walk past these frescoes. So seeing what bad government was historically, and reading about it, interviewing people in the gallery, then I came back home and created this. And my process is largely inspired by collage as well as surrealism, and then the foundation of the techniques is situated in the past, so many of my processes are from the 16th century. Figuring out what an allegory of bad government was easier than what good government was. This is somewhat the 7 deadly sins. All of these people are situated at a table. It's a very disjointed table, and I also wanted to suggest that it went on like forever. And there are elements of war, but in the background, it's like the world is on fire, it's in total destruction. There is a tea party. This would be similar to Alice in Wonderland's tea party, but the cups are full of blood. Here is my allegory for tyranny. Tyranny has a small papal tiara, and it has a crown in its mouth, so it's like eating wealth, eating jewels, and it's pushing away the fruits of the earth. From there, this is rage, and rage is blind, kind of a simple metaphor there. This is an unusual one, not a traditional individual in bad government, but I call that self-misery. Self-misery is a bat wearing the eyes of Christ and has a sock puppet talking to a dead mouse to represent the internal voices that might happen in one's head. I think many people have a toxic inner critic that is not allowing them to be their best, and it can torture them. From there, this is the person that represents the Alice figure. She is having her tea. She just wants her rituals that represent stability, normality, decorum, and to go back to something that represents safety and ritual that's not going to address the problems at hand. The problems at hand would include war, would include the destruction of the natural environment, would include all of this discord, but her eyes are closed and she doesn't want to know what the smell is of something burning. She doesn't want to know what that might be. And in the foreground, well, there's a head of a frog. He's wearing a suit, and in the original collage work for this figure had more visual elements, but I just put them inside of his pants. So what this represents is sloth or narcissism. For those of you who have ever been part of a civic council or any kind of board meeting or maybe even a faculty meeting, there's always someone who's going to take the entire situation, no matter what you're trying to solve, and make it about themselves. So how ineffectual that is to producing change or allowing for there to be a movement that might cause resolution or progress. This person is just going to be engorged with ingesting, absorbing all of the energy and the entire chaos and making it about themselves. I guess the other, it's not really a person at the table, but this is a lion with a crown of thorns like Christ, and it's sort of zooming in and causing more chaos at the table. But I feel like this might be an interpretation of righteous indignation, and in that way I'm not sure if it's part of bad government or if it is the exhaust system of when things have gone completely awry and you have to turn over the tables of the moneylenders and scream about the inequity or how wrong everything is. Is it part of the problem or is it part of the solution? So when I was doing all of this, yes, I was totally prepared that this would be about external systems, and the real shock is that this is about internal states of mind, and that you cannot be the lesser of one of these evils if you start to have one of them in your head, then all of them live there. And I think our minds are gardens. What you plant there grows, and these would be the seeds of discord that unsettle and unsituate your mind to have you live in your own hell. So, any more questions about this piece?
How do you find your reference images for some of the jewelry and some of the details?
So in order to have enough images for this piece, I was working in concert with the Ringling Museum, and the Ringling Museum librarians were really helpful. They had a whole closet of old posters from their exhibitions, and this was really fundamental to creating this piece. And then surreptitiously, I would then have the opportunity to show this piece at the Ringling Museum in 2016. When I'm trying to find reference photos, sometimes I go to the library or work from books or calendars, but also working with Google image searches. But this one I was really lucky to work with extant posters from their collection. Thank you for asking. Especially like this part is from the Ringling Museum, and some of this is influenced by their collection. So it's pretty random. And then I also I plan on continuing this theme in my work in some capacity. I'm interested in paintings that have been stolen. So this here is just from a National Geographic, but it's Jesus on the Sea of Galilee by Rembrandt, and that's one of the paintings that was stolen in the Great Heist at the Elizabeth Stuart Gardner Museum. So while they're very metatextual and they're very allegorical and they have lots of, I guess what you would call Easter eggs hidden within them, there are subplots that then continue across paintings and across other bodies of work. So that's one that I hope to continue.
Yes.
2 questions.
Okay.
Is my perception that you've become more explicitly, externally autobiographical with time? Have you, or you use your own image more than you did in your early work, or am I unaware of something?
I think they're all self-portraits. That's one element. And then I don't know, actually, so a lot of these collages are from early paintings, and in the first review of my work in Philadelphia in 2004, one of the critiques was that I wasn't autobiographical enough, and she didn't recognize they were all self-portraits. So then I just gave up representing the self. I just decided they were all me. And what I would say is this represents 20 years of making, but the first 10 are really like being a blues singer and speaking more about personal shadow and personal trauma and personal sorrow. And then the second 10 years were more about how I could address things that affected the world or in a more universal setting. I mean, I also found that the first, a lot of people identified with the sorrow. I thought that was universal, but I wanted to expand like the shadow, what is the shadow of the world? So.
Second question. So much of your stuff comes from mythology, from psychology, but you have a fairly strong entomological and zoological element that you seem to paint in a slightly different, very realistic way.
Okay.
Is there anything going on there?
Can you be more specific? Can you show me somewhere where you're
You're mating ladybugs in at least 2.
Okay. They're all
places.
metaphorical.
Okay. But they're biologically fairly real.
Yes.
Too. Sure.
Yeah.
And the snakes, and
So, well, I can speak about this painting. This painting is anti-vanitas. This is a self-portrait, more, I think it looks like me. And this painting is a response to a historical painting by the same title. The idea of a vanitas is a reflection on life and death. So by being anti-vanitas, it is a rejection of death. And I would say this is the darkest painting I could paint about something light. So while this is an allusion to Queen Elizabeth holding this rainbow, and it's a desaturated rainbow, the symbolism of the vulture for many cultures is it is sacred. This act of disposing of the body, vultures don't kill anyone. They clean up all of the mess, so in that way they're public servants. And I'm showing this death of this serpent, and then above is an Ouroboros, and that Ouroboros or a nimbus, a symbol of eternal life, or that life goes on. I'm suggesting that as much as death is a reality that affects us all, that there is something possible that's afterlife. And if anybody has more questions about this painting.
Why the snake is a halo?
That is an allusion to the other painting. I believe it's not Correggio, it's another 16th century painter. And I wanted to see if I could do it. It's also like skill to try and show that symbol. But the Ouroboros is a alchemical symbol for eternal life. So it was just fun to use it because it also is very often used as like a halo or an aura. And I liked using serpents historically, like post-Christian, have been laid low, but serpents were part of every creative myth in every culture on every continent. So I'm also interested in underrepresented or denigrated symbols and restoring them to their power.
What about the eye in the middle?
So this eye, so you'll notice in a lot of my prior works, I'm working with eye masks, and this was a device that I used early in my work. Understand as artists, we have to do a lot of self-portraits, and I recall a period in undergrad where I no longer wanted to do a self-portrait. I had painted myself over or drawn myself over and over and over again, and I wanted a different assignment, I wanted a different technique to look at something differently. But when I created this way of cutting up art history and insinuating myself into it, I became an armature, and I could act like kabuki, I could do theater, I could become a goddess, I could become a monster, I could become all these different identities and reveal different parts of the self, and I was somewhat hidden. And then if you just look at the eye itself, the eye takes the exterior world into the inner world and then reveals the inner world to the outer, so it is this window or this doorway or this way of conducting information. And I was experimenting with using this image of, it's probably from Our Lady of Sorrow or Our Man of Sorrow, and inverting it. You see my eyes, but my eyes are closed, so it's a different level of reveal than the earlier work. But when I'm working with this and this other painting called Visionary, it's talking about what's happening inside of the mind, because when you close your eyes, there's infinite space within your own imagination, and I try to work with students in the capacity to understand that your mind is a garden, what you plant there grows, but also you can travel to outer space, you can travel within memory, you can travel to all kinds of limitless possibilities within this space. And I feel like it's underutilized, unrecognized, but also relates to intuition and anything that might be related to PSI, like anything related to the porosity of humans and how we can work through synchronicity and coincidence. I feel like there's a real lack of understanding of the mind. We've put so much comprehension into what I call the silicon computers versus the water computer. And what questions do we ask ourselves, and what are the answers that come from that? If our eye is this incredible organ tool that sees 3 million colors, then what is it that our brain can do in computation and revelation through the use of questions? And we're at a point in civilization where we have to ask more serious questions of ourselves. We have maximized our population on Earth. There are more people alive right now than I think have ever been born. And yet we're looking at situations where human beings are becoming irrelevant or their lives not valued. And if we're able to tap everything that's in our human capacity, then what would be possible if we have the answers individually and working collectively to change what's happening? So a lot of the surreal imaginings theme with the work is just to inspire people to use their imaginations, to use their minds, and to think of other possibilities for themselves and how you're using your internal mind. This is Consciousness and Mort, or Consciousness and Death, and this is another self-portrait, yet, yes, many of my paintings start in the mind's eye, which to some degree that is called visionary painting. And then what I do is I seek to find images to match the pictures in my head. So some of the other work is more like collage and like a retrofit Frankenstein, like you're trying to reverse engineer the picture in your head. This I did with source imagery, like I created photos and then painted from it, so it's more from photographic. this figure would be the dead one, and it's wearing the Tower of Babel as a hat, and then this one is coming to life. And what I hope to capture in this painting are these moments that I think we all have where you think you're going to be fully conscious. You're going to wake up. You wake up and you are in your body, and you're going to get everything done today that you meant to get done, and you're going to get it, all the goals, all of the things that we promised we're going to do to our body, and you wake up, and then you come back 6 months later and you're there again. And what happened between now and 6 months? Was there a lot of assignments? Was there a lot of work? Where there was something tragic happening in the family where you just had to go into fight or flight and existence mode, and now you're back? And now what are we going to do? And this kind of constant state of resuscitation that makes me feel like very often I'm not corporeal, but like I'm a ghost, that I'm engaging in the world in this capacity where I'm not fully here. And like, what would it be to be fully here all the time? And then I'm comparing those to the Old Testament and the New Testament, and these are just the symbols that came through for that. So the Old Testament, you have the Tower of Babel, and all the people were one at that time, and they spoke the same language, and they were going to reach God. They were going to get all the goals done. They were going to get all the way up there to whatever that figure was above. And then that was hubris or pride. That was something to be smoked. So they had to send them all down and put them into different tribes, and they would all speak different languages, and they would never have that coherency again. They would all be separate to themselves and each other. And then you have this moment in the New Testament, which is that Pentecost, this moment of afflatus, where you are full of recognition and light, and you have everyone speaking in tongues, but everyone is speaking the same language. So it seems to be this reconciliation, or this other side of communication, where you are speaking the word of God. You're speaking in this divine way, and the way that this promises connection, and this promises punishment, this promises defeat. So I'm always seeking to find symbols that represent these things that are just so complex. I can put them into words now, but usually when I'm painting the painting, I have no idea what I'm doing. It's really like I see images in my mind, and I call that part like knock-knock jokes with the universe, but the universe is the universe of my brain. And then I paint the painting, and then it's like, okay, I start to, with the material, because this is just like earth combined with oil, trying to create some kind of verisimilitude or some kind of mirror, some kind of image that represents these conscious thoughts that I'm moving through, and I hope other people relate to them too.
I want just to hear as much as you'll tell us about the symbology of tarot and what you used in here. I want to hear about dreams and divinities.
Oh, okay.
About mythology, whatever.
So, very interestingly, yes, you asked about Dreams and Divinities. That's a collective that I'm part of. There are 7 women who are working together to build a tarot deck. I did not know when I composed this picture that it would be part of that deck. But for the last 7 years, we've been working on the major arcana and different aspects of making that collaborative piece. And then honestly, we were running out of time, and I was like, but this makes a perfect tower card. The title of the piece is 50-Foot Queenie. So the title of the painting is from a PJ Harvey's song, and 50-Foot Queenie, her work is very punk, it's very aggressive, it's female ballads. So I would say in that way, the title is important because this is a female ballad. And while I use the Tower of Babel over and over again in my work, I find that about complexity of structures. In this painting behind everyone over there, the Manufacturing of Tears, it's a similar trope. So Tower of Babel on the bottom and like a Magdalene on top. But this one is angry, her tower's on fire. So the tower is a structure, it's the body. I think in this point I felt locked into location, and the tower is on fire. All the demons of hell are coming out of the bottom of the tower, and the symbolism of the card for the tarot of the tower is transformation or change. I think of, I saw Laurie Anderson perform in like 1994, and she said that when her father died, it was like a library had burned down. So I like this idea of everything you have, all of your memories, all of your collective thoughts and meanings and experiences, what you carry with you and what you think reality is, and then the tower is the destruction of that. And then every time I've jumped in my own life, it's been immediately replaced with something infinitely better. So you're not supposed to be afraid about the destruction, that when things are being taken away, it's for a higher reason and you should move forward. At the same time, this is not quite that optimistic. She is recognizing that there is a hand from above that would represent something supernatural, pulling her out, maybe pulling her to safety. But she has two faces. She has like a face mask. And so if it pulls that off, there's just going to be like maybe more her. It's not actually going to rescue her. It's this act of surrender that it's going to take everything away. At the same time, these show up for the first time. These are these birds with giant eyes, and I call those looky-loos. Looky-loos are those people who are going to watch you during your worst moments and not help. So, they're just going to watch the fire. I would say this was a moment of crisis in my life, and it was a moment of awareness, but at the same time, I'm spending, I don't know, like 50 to 100 hours to just document it. Like, everything's terrible, everything's horrible, but I also trust the system that's going to replace everything in this terrible moment with something better.
Well, in moments like that, that's when you wake up, like you were talking about.
Yeah, it took a lot more than that. But yes, that is about a personal moment of revelation. I think when I was going through this, it was, you can invite influence and people into your life and into your home and into your body that you cannot get rid of. So you have to be really careful what you do. It's a cautionary tale. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.